These are commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda and written by Swami Kriya-yoga. This week's reading is Who Are True Christians? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Jesus Christ said in the Gospel of St. John, "All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them." Many Christians, not surprisingly, quote this saying in condemnation of other spiritual teachers, not only the Old Testament prophets, but also Buddha, Krishna, and others who lived before Jesus, as well as any who came after him. Yet Jesus himself said in St. Matthew, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Nowhere do we find Jesus condemning or even gently criticizing other spiritual masters. His criticisms were reserved for worldly attitudes and for those hypocritical Pharisees who had allowed religion to become for them a pretense. Yogananda explained that the expression, "all that ever came before me," referred to those spiritual teachers who placed their egos and their self-importance ahead of the Christ consciousness, in the sense of drawing people's devotion to themselves and not offering it where alone it truly belongs, to God. Yogananda was very firm in this regard. For example, he never spoke of anyone as his disciple. Instead, he always insisted they are God's disciples. God is the guru, not I. Ego is a way station on the soul's journey toward enlightenment. The soul is first trapped in lower bodily forms. Slowly it evolves to the human level, at which point self-consciousness appears. Only in human form can self-consciousness transcend material form altogether, including the lower identity of ego consciousness, and discover the true divine self within. Self-consciousness, manifested as ego, is an incentive to deliberate self-development. Later in this process of development, however, the ego becomes an obstruction. Inevitably, new spiritual aspirants do not emerge effortlessly from the vortex of ego consciousness. Desire must be offered up resolutely and ever more wholeheartedly on the altar of infinity. It is a gradual process, and few, even among those who seek to help others, are free of ego. If, however, their motive in teaching is not to serve, but to be served, they deserve a severe reprimand, as Jesus gave them. For this direction of development is no longer upward, but downward. In the name of giving up desires, they are creating new ones. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. Their relentless foe it is, a flame never quenched. Intellect, mind, and senses, these combined are referred to as the seat of desire. Desire through them deludes and eclipses the discrimination of the embodied soul. O Arjuna, discipline your senses, and having done so, work to destroy desire, annihilator of wisdom and of self-realization. Give God the credit for everything that you do. see him as the true doer of all action. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. I love this passage from the Gita. Desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. There's a wonderful story about Yudhisthira, who was the oldest brother of the Pandava clan. He was the king of Dharma. He was the king of the kingdom of the Pandavas. And in the Mahabharata, those are the good guys. The Kauravas are the bad guys. So you hiss when the Kauravas come on. You cheer for the Pandavas. And Yudhisthira was the son of Dharma. So he was the king of Dharma, of righteousness, of right action. And yet, when the Kaurava king, Duryodhana, the king of the Kauravas, who Master said represented material desire, when Duryodhana sent his messenger to the Pandavas, and that messenger said, Duryodhana wants to challenge you to a game of dice, just a friendly game of dice. And even the messenger was warning Yudhisthira, don't go, don't do it. But Yudhisthira said, he's my cousin, I have to, fulfill all righteousness. So he went. And Duryodhana didn't play, he had his uncle Shakuni play, who was a great master of dice and a great cheat. And so Yudhisthira rolled the dice and he lost all his armies. And he rolled again, lost all his chariots, and then all his palaces, all his land, and all of his kingdom was gone. And he said, well, I've lost everything. Duryodhana said, oh, no, you haven't. You still have your brothers. Let's roll the dice for them. And one by one, they were all lost. And Yudhisthira said, well, I've lost everything. No, you still have yourself. Roll for yourself. He lost himself. And then he lost his wife. And they dragged his wife into the court. They insulted her. And they argued. There's a long discourse about everything. And then they said, okay, one more roll of dice, and you and your brothers and your wife will be free at least. You won't be slaves, but you will go into exile for 13 years and then live incognito for the 14th. And then when you come back, we'll talk about the kingdom. Well, that's when the battle happens. But in this moment, Yudhisthira is about to roll one final roll of dice to at least not gain back any material, anything. They even had to give up their fine clothes. But at least to go into exile as free people. And he was about to roll the dice, and his wife said, invoke Krishna. Pray to the Lord. And he rolled the dice, and he won. The only time he won. because he prayed to Krishna. Desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. That was the king of Dharma. What about us? Well, it says that Yudhisthira was in the habit of invoking the Lord's blessings on any undertaking that he ever did. But he was obscured. The wisdom of the wise was obscured by this gripping desire. It's an analogy. So Draupadi, his wife, tells us what to do. For God's sake, invoke the wisdom of the wise before you and engage in anything. Anything. That's what we need to do. And in that way, we can defeat King Material Desire, Duryodhana, the bad guy. What do we really want from life? We think that these desires that we manifest and create, there's a story that Swami used to tell about how people in, I think it might have been Mexico, but I can't remember for sure where they were. But at any rate, no matter where they were, a company came in and wanted labor that was reasonably priced. So they enlisted all these people to do this sewing or whatever it was, so that they could then take the product back to their own country and sell it for a higher price and make more profit. Well, the only trouble is that these people would happily work for a few months, and then they go back to their village with this money that they had and be perfectly content. So these company people were scratching their heads. Okay, what are we going to do? They came up with a brilliant idea. They brought in the Sears catalog. And they gave it to everybody. And then suddenly, everybody was working all year round because they had desires. It makes us a slave. That's what it does. I have a friend who used to say that he would go to the refrigerator and open the door, and he'd want to change the channel. He wanted to have more choices in there. And I remembered that the other day when I went to the refrigerator and I thought, you're not hungry, you're just looking for entertainment. Shut the door. Sri Yukteswar said, be a lion of self-control. Don't let the frogs of sense desire kick you around. How often we are battered back and forth by desires. What we need to do is remember to invoke God's presence, yes, and also to cultivate devotion. The more that we trust in God, the more that we love God, the more we surrender to God, He becomes, as the Gita says, the supremely relishable. Better than anything in the refrigerator. Better than anything in the Sears catalog. Better than anything else. And that's the beauty of the spiritual path. It's not as though it's struggle, 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 and then poof, one day, okay, finally you're realized. It's every day gets better. Every day, every meditation, there's a little more hope, a little more joy. Yogananda said when you chant and you feel and meditate and you feel just a little bit of joy, that's the first glimmer of God coming into your life. Play those chants all the time. Play them in your car, in your house, in your meditation room. Yogananda experienced God. He didn't just think about God. He experienced God and God's response in every one of the cosmic chants that Yogananda wrote. So they're infused with that power. They have power. And so if we are open to that power, it can come to us in that music. I have to tell you this other story that's been in my mind lately of Ramakrishna, who was a great saint in the 1800s. And he passed away before Yogananda was born. But Ramakrishna was the priest of the Dakshineshwar temple, where the Kali statue is. Those of you who've been to India with us, we visited that beautiful place where later Yogananda had the vision of Kali. And Ramakrishna was 100% devotion. He was just in great samadhi, in great ecstasy a lot of the time. His whole life is just this amazing story of devotion. And his guru, who came in Ramakrishna's adulthood, was total austerity, just this jnanic. We have that saying, neti, neti, not this, not that, which is what we should say when we meet desires, not this, not that, neti, neti. But Totapuri was the one who said of Ramakrishna, when Ramakrishna went into an ecstasy that lasted for 3 days, and Totapuri would walk around the perimeter of the little house where Ramakrishna was in samadhi, protecting it, so that no one disturbed him. And he said, Ramakrishna experienced in 3 days what it took me years to accomplish. So he was very tuned into that devotional aspect of Ramakrishna, but he was also the one who wanted Ramakrishna to go beyond all form and not just worship God as in a form, but go into the formlessness, the infinite. And that's when he broke a glass and put the tip of the glass right here, so that focus through the pain would come to Ramakrishna, and he went into the formless. But there's a beautiful story about Totapuri, who again was that austere, jnanic energy. And he at one point decided, why am I even in this world? I want to merge with the infinite. I'm beyond form. I want nothing of this world. So he went to a great river, huge, deep river, and he started walking down the shore into the river. And his plan was to just be merged and leave his body. This was a deep, deep, huge river, and as he was walking, his feet weren't even getting wet. And he realized that the water was parting for him. Divine Mother didn't want him to lose his body. She wanted to take care of him and show him how much she loved him. And he didn't know what to think. Suddenly he was on the other side, and he wasn't even wet. And he turned around and he came back, and the waters parted for him. And he was on dry land. And he fell down in ecstasy in the love that God had for him. So we are in our little lives doing the best we can, juggling family and loved ones and job and money and health and all these very important things. And they seem very important. If we can't walk, or we can't talk, or we can't think properly. I remember Kamala Silva, who has a signed book out in the book sale there today. She lived at Ananda for a long time. We took care of her for as long as we could. But she had dementia and had to be helped. And someone was saying to Swami Kriyananda, oh, it's such a shame, such a great devotee of Yogananda, a direct disciple of Yogananda, and had so much realization and power, spiritual power, and now she's got dementia. Such a tragedy. And Swami looked at the person and he said, it's just the mind. We are so much more than just the mind, just the body. Love God. Desire, the Gita says, is a flame never quenched, but it can be replaced by the flame of devotion. Do that which you find inspiring, that you feel God's presence. Walking in nature, that's what it is for me. The quiet, the peace, the silence, the life in nature. Whatever it is for you, find that. Do that. Give energy to that. And try to meditate more and more deeply. Meditation can often be very dry for a long time. I've found that in my own life. And then suddenly, without any effort on my part, there it is. That stillness, that sweetness. Surrender your spiritual life to God. Just surrender it. Let Him do it. God is the doer. Let Him evolve through you as He wills. Give everything up to Him. And He will direct your path to perfect love.
There's a little story that I wanted to share of Yogananda in reference to this desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. And this occurred in the 1930s. And someone had given Yogananda ginger ale, which he enjoyed, and reminded him of the lemonade, nimbu pani, that he had had in India in his youth. And so he developed a taste for ginger ale, and one of the disciples decided, noticed that he was enjoying it, so made a point of ensuring that there was ginger ale wherever Yogananda went, so that he could always have it if he ever wanted it. And so he did. He Well, then one fine day, Yogananda was somewhere and there wasn't ginger ale. And he missed it. And he said to himself, "You think you've been drinking ginger ale, but the ginger ale has been drinking you. It's time to quit," which he did. And it's interesting because after that he said, some time went by and he tasted ginger ale. And he said, apart from the fact that he had no desire for the ginger ale, he couldn't even taste it. It's like he had eliminated it from his consciousness to the degree that he could no longer even taste the ginger ale. And he said, and that was it. I gave it up completely. Now, the interesting part of that, because that could sound a little on the austere side, sort of like what Nirmala was describing about Totapuri, which sounds kind of dry and kind of, sort of, what grim determination. Let's hold up the banner, grim determination. Come on, everybody, grim determination. Well, what Yogananda was affirming, and of course had already realized long since, was that there's a bliss inside that any sensory experience is just a dim echo of. And he wasn't interested in dim echoes or, sort of vague abstractions. He wanted the actual experience of God's joy, which is ever new, which is always changing and always coming in some new way to us. And that habit, I had the experience a little less colorfully, and nobody provided it to me. I found it myself, but I got to develop a nice taste for coffee, really good coffee, not the burned stuff that they serve in so many of these places, but the really, really rich, nice, fine. And I limited myself to 1 cup a day in the morning, and I really enjoyed that 1 cup, when you get that little boost, little push, Except that on the day that you, for whatever reason, can't get that coffee, not only comes the, I missed that, which isn't so great, but then comes the headache. The headache of eternity, the headache of the eternal religion. In my case, if the longer that those days, the progressive days, if it went a whole month and then I didn't have one, that was a nasty headache. And I just decided, I don't want any more headaches. I'm not interested in that. I've had enough headaches through the incarnations. It's just not useful. It's not helpful. So many times in life, what we think, what we assume, the way we've done the math adds up a certain way. And we think, okay, well, therefore I have to do this. And we discover, so I'll give another example. This is from my teenage years when I was a runner. And I used to run by myself. Friends of mine, there were about 3 or 4 of them. They would get together every day and they would run about 3 miles. And I thought, oh, come on, that's for wimps. And so I would go, this was Illinois in the summertime, during the off season. We weren't practicing as a team then. So I would go and I would run 10 miles. In the hot sun, mind you, so which in Illinois would be like 90 plus degrees, but the humidity was just like sky high. I could lose 10 pounds on a run, which of course was like a gallon of water mainly, but seriously, 10 pounds is a lot of weight to lose on a run. And when I finished that run, what would I do? I wouldn't just like leap in a swimming pool. We didn't have one. If we had, I might have. I didn't just go jump in the shower. No. I had to go to the top of the garage. So we had this garage, separate building. Well, it wasn't insulated up there, so it was like an oven. It was like a sauna, in fact, seriously. It was probably 120 degrees up there. So I would sit and I would perspire a little more just to make sure, just sort of like like memories of that austerity coming from some other lifetime. Let's just suffer. But on a certain level, it was like I wanted that experience. Because, you coming back down from that attic after being up there, 90 degrees felt like, what's the problem here? This is just wonderful. Feels really fresh and comfortable. Now, here was the thing, though. The next day, I would think, okay, and I timed my run, so I could do my 10 miles in 75 minutes or something like that. 75 minutes, that's about the pace I was running. Well, the next day I would go out, and if I could get through the 10 miles at all, it would be more like 90 minutes or 100 minutes. It was like, I was so disgusted and so disappointed. It was like, how come I can't? And then the following day, maybe I could do it or maybe I couldn't. But it was this roller coaster ride of, sometimes I could do it really well and other times not. Well, what I came to discover was that my friends who were the wimps doing only 3 miles or 5 miles, they were doing it every single day. And not only were they doing it every single day, they were enjoying it every single day. And I finally ended up going with them and discovered, lo and behold, that there was more to be gained by a little bit of consistent effort every day than by going for this wild extreme and then crashing and burning on the other side of it, et cetera, et cetera. It was an assumption. Desire is often a kind of assumption. We think, okay, I've got to get that thing. It's, and it's like on the altar of our consciousness. And we get it, and then what? Then we're stuck with the dumb thing. We're stuck with the ginger ale, or we're stuck with the whatever it is in life. And it's like, now what? And it's never enough. That's the problem. If it comes from outside, it's never enough. It's okay. It's all right. It's not inappropriate to have desire. It's inappropriate to be beholden to desire. That's the challenge. And of course, and it's a game of dice. It's a beautiful analogy or imagery that Nirmala shared, because when you go in, I remember also during my high school years, I was a pretty good poker player. I share that somewhat hesitantly, but I actually won a fair amount of money. However, one little thing I learned, my dad, as part of my edification, thought he had to take me to Las Vegas and show me a gambling casino, and because he was very good at that sort of thing. I mean, desire may obscure the wisdom of the wise, but my dad could really play blackjack, and he generally won. And so he thought to show it to me. Well, I lost all the money I had so carefully won playing poker. Anyway, but it was a good lesson, because one of the things that I learned was, if you walk into a gambling casino thinking that you can win something, you know what? You have already lost. Whether you ever put a single nickel into a slot machine or a single dollar on the blackjack table, you've already lost just because of the desire, thinking, okay, I can get something for nothing, or I can get fulfillment, and my eyes, get all. See, Yudhishthira got caught up in that momentum, and it's a kind of disease. Well, desire itself is a kind of disease. It's an affirmation of lack, an affirmation that we don't have the fulfillment of God's presence inside of us. And that will have to ultimately be broken. Or another way to look at it, which is a little horrifying and inspiring and horrifying at the same time. Now, isn't that an interesting combination? Every desire must be fulfilled. Now, that sounds great, doesn't it? Except every desire has to be fulfilled, which means it can go on and on and on, because desire is like the hydra. You chop one head off and 9 more grow back, and it just keeps going and going and going. There's no end to it. So at a certain point, we have to just cut it off and say, Divine Mother, just as Nirmala was describing, I'm yours. I offer myself completely to you. Show me the bliss of my own being beyond all this illusion, and I will be yours forever.